Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, it's a continuation of the Iron Stitch series with Jen from Night Owl Collectables. She is a wonderful artist and she sent me a ton of supplies. The goal is that both of us have the same supplies and we create something, usually with a slow stitching piece in mind or perhaps junk journaling. I'll show you my process for creating what I made and then take a look at her channel to see what she did as well. And I'll include that link below. So let's get started. So to start this challenge, I can't even tell you, Jennifer sent an incredible, I call it a care package because there's so many beautiful elements to it. Look at this fabric. Oh, this is a sewer's dream. There's all these beautiful textures, really rich earth tones, dots, which I love. There's this knitted material, it's got a little shine in it, and beautiful greens and blues and grays. There was a yard of this beautiful black and white fabric with a little hint of red. Oh, love it. And then there's more. Let me just show you the gorgeous elements here, my favorite part. Now there's more fabric. This is just beautiful lace trim. Oh, so beautiful. The color. Look at this white lace. Oh, just gorgeous. There's some of this tulle. It's like a rose gold and a gold, and there's a little metallic in this rose gold. Beautiful. And then there are the extras that, they are fabulous. There's these very interesting beads. They look handmade. Then there's this beautiful little jar of trim, satin ribbon, wool, fluffy textures, metallic. Oh, just gorgeous. Oh, can't wait to play with this. And look at this gold ribbon. It's a trim and it's just so elegant. And then in my big tray here, I have just an amazing assortment of beads. Oh, and these cute little vials of magic. Jennifer chose the theme this time and it's beach, and I am in heaven. I cannot wait to get started. Let me show you some of the parameters I set up for myself, and then I'll dig through these supplies and set some aside to work with. I have to tone it down to a smaller amount because it's so overwhelming. Jennifer, thank you so much. So I decided to do a book page. This is a piece of fabric long enough to do 2 pages, and then I stitched them together. But I'm only going to work on the one side today. I have a piece of fabric that kind of reminds me of sand. It's just mottled, and I think it will make a great background, just so that this textured quilting doesn't show. And now from here, I made a little square template. I'm going to just have a collection of beach treasures. I'm actually thinking of it in terms of something a mermaid might collect, and I can't wait to get started. In theory, I'll have fabric squares and then those treasures on each fabric square. This is so exciting to start with. So after narrowing down my choices, I have things set aside in piles, and I found some things that I'm going to use from my own stash to make this essentially a mermaid scrapbook or mermaid treasures. I went through all the fabric and it is lovely. I've added one piece of blue from my own because I like really bright colors. And these are going to be the background colors of each of the squares. So the first thing I want to do is cut an assortment of squares. And I made a little template for that. I took the paper template and I just traced it onto cardboard, knowing that I have to cut 16 of these out and trace around them. So I've cut 5 different backgrounds to use for the squares, and I'm not sure what formation I'm going to use, but I like to have that option to play with these. On the back, I added some fusible interfacing. It's not sticky on both sides, just one side, and this prevents a little bit of the fraying, and it gives a little more substance to each of these squares to allow me to embellish them. Now I want to get started right away. There are some that are more involved than others. So I have this beautiful lace that Jennifer sent me, and I just think it looks like a whirlpool. So I'm going to use that just as it is on one of the backgrounds, and I think it looks great on the dark background. So that will be an easy one. I'll just line it up onto my square, and then I'll just cut around it. And when I go to attach it to my piece, I'll just add a few stitches, and then I can sew it down to my block. So that's one of the 16 mostly done. Just have a little bit of work to do with it. I also had this fabric. It's upholstery fabric, and it's got these shells on it, and there's a little bit of texture, and I couldn't wait to use that. So I'm going to cut out the shell and put it on a background, and then I'm going to take some of the beautiful beads that Jennifer sent me and embellish that. So that's a second one that I can work on. I think I'm going to go with the neutral color here. And to prevent this from fraying, I do have a fusible background on the back of it that is adhesive on both sides. I'll just remove this sticker layer, trim this up first, and then set it down on one of the pieces here that I want. I really want to embellish it with the beads and make that pop. So that's another one that I'll start to work on. I have some other ideas. I have this beautiful charm of a starfish. I think it's a bead. If I could look around, I might see a hole in it to indicate that, right up top there. So that's another one, and I just want to choose a nice background for that. I can always play around with it. I think I'm going to use this dark again. And again, I'm going to take some of the beads that Jennifer sent me and add them just to around it to make it really pop. We'll do that later. I have this little cardboard tag that I made, and I aged it to look like it was like rusty. And this is going to be my tag for the entire piece, where I'm going to come up with a title for it. And I'll just attach that to one of the blocks. I think it looks great attached to this bright blue one. So I'll set that aside. I wanted to incorporate a sand dollar, but they're very fragile. So I'm going to make my own out of fabric. I have a piece of white fabric here. Set this up. It has the fusible sticky backing on it. So I can set this down just to trace the shape. And I'll try and do it gingerly. I don't want to damage the sand dollar. This is for my collection. And the beauty of this sand dollar is I can just also trace inside these little areas here to get the accurate placement. And then, like all sand dollars, it has this beautiful like flower design. And I'll have to eyeball that, and I'll stitch all around these images. So right now I'll just cut this out and speed it along so you can see the process. And when I actually adhere it to my block, the iron will get rid of that ink. But before that, I want to make those stitches just with some embroidery floss to really make it indicative of the sand dollar. So here I have the placement of the sand dollar. I'll just extend this a little. And now I want to create, just with this marker, that floral design. There's kind of a point in the center, and then it emanates out from that. Elongate these as needed. I just want them to all come together a little closer than I have it. So now I can remove the backing and do my stitching around those marks on this little piece. So I'm just going to use some pearl thread here, and I'll just take the back of this and remove, just peel off that paper. I don't want to stitch through that. And now I'm going to stitch through this part. With the white, I'm going to go around these essentially flower petals, and then I'll use a darker color to make the shadows here indicative of these points. Now I'm just using a stem stitch because I just want to capture that shape. And I don't want it to really overpower anything on this sand dollar. Just trying to get a hint of that sand dollar. I've walked the beach for many years and I can count in one hand the amount of time I've found sand dollars, intact sand dollars on the beach. I like using the stem stitch because it creates kind of a single stitch in appearance, a continuous line I should say, even though it's made of many stitches. And to get a really nice tight curve, you want to make smaller stitches and larger stitches if you're not as concerned. I'm not using very small stitches here, even though this is a very small little piece. I like the texture that the pearl thread brings to this piece. It adds so much dimension even though it's just white on white. So I have all the petals done. Now I want to create those little shadows for those holes on the sand dollar. So I'll just knot it on the back. So now I have a single strand of gray floss, and I'm just going to come in here and just make something for the shadows. Start at one end, show you this on one of the little holes on the sand dollar, and I'll just stitch down a couple of times going back and forth, a little satin stitch. So I did my main stitch and now I'm doing one beneath it and I'll do one above it, hugging very close. I'm not using the same depth of the stitch each time. I just wanted to make it look a little dimensional. So that's one, and now I'll continue with the remaining four. So now I have it stitched down with the little pieces that I like on it. The next stage would be to adhere it to the background just with an iron, which will get rid of those marks on the front, the orange ones, and it'll adhere this down. But because sand dollars have a little bit of dimension, I'm going to take a little piece of batting. Just cut a little piece for the center of it. And I'll round it out. Doesn't have to be perfectly round, but I'll set it right on the center, and that will give just a little bit of a raised texture. So I'll get out my iron and press this down. So I just want to line this up, and now I'll take my hot iron and press it down. And I have my sand dollar. Now the white on white is less noticeable now than it was before, so I want to modify that a little bit. Now to do that, I'm just going to take a gray colored pencil and I'm just going to go on the inside of these petals. Just run the pencil just on the inside, maybe a little bit on the outside just to give a little depth. Not looking for a harsh line. And while I'm at it, I think I'll just shade the edge. My color's nice and subtle. It just gives a little more dimension to the project. So I'm very happy now with my sand dollar block. Now I can continue on with some others. So I have an actual shell that I found on the beach. Then I'll add it like this. I think I'm going to use a little bit of glue to glue it down. There are no holes in this shell, but I'm happy with that. So that's one other block. Now one of my favorite blocks to work on is the treasure, the found treasure. My sister, when she was younger, her favorite movie when she was a child was The Little Mermaid. And one of the things that was so interesting was all the little found objects that Ariel had that she thought were treasures from above. So I thought I would recreate that. I have a little key, a little sprocket, a button, a little coin, and a fork. And if you've watched the movie, you know what the fork is for. She used it to comb her hair. It's adorable. So I'm going to attach those. I'll glue the coin down, but I'll stitch the others in place. The next little treasure I'm going to make is a mermaid's crown. Jen sent me this beautiful, beautiful gold lace. So I'm going to cut that up and use that as the crown. I just love this. I'm going to incorporate some of those buttons too. So I really like this piece on the crown here. It looks like the front of a crown to me. So I'll very carefully cut around. So I'm left with a really tall object. I'm going to actually kind of cut into this. And I have like a little tiara, and now I get to really embellish it. Clip it to match the height on both sides. And then some of these gorgeous beads that Jen sent. I think I like that little one right in the center. And then some of these little beads on the side. So I'll start stringing that, seeing if I want to modify it further. So I found a few other beads that I might use. I have one strand of yellow embroidery floss to match that crown. The first part will be to tack down the crown. I'll start in the center here. And I just need a few stitches to hold it securely in place on my fabric square. As I add the beads and the buttons, it will further secure it. So I just want enough right now to hold it down in place. Now I'm going to work my way back to the center of the crown and put in my focal bead here. The hole goes through the center, so the key is if I can get my needle through that hole, and I can, I'm going to have to look for a smaller needle. Let's see if this one will work. Pulls it right through. So I'll just make sure it goes to the right place. Tack it down, and then I'll go through it a couple more times. And I'll speed up this process so you can see me just creating the embellished crown here with the beads. It's amazing how just that sparkle from a few beads really elevates it. So I think that's beautiful. I like to have my largest beads in the center and work away from that. So I think this is the next bead. Yep. Initially I thought I wanted all golds, but I really like the sparkle that the contrasting colors adds. And it still looks like a gold crown, just with a little more interest. I really like to reinforce these beads. It makes such a difference for staying power. And then I guess I'll go with a little orange bead on the side. So now I like how that looks, but I still think it needs a few more beads, and I have these gorgeous beads to choose from. So I'll add a few more. And there I have a little mermaid crown. Very happy with that. Oh, adorable. For my next one, I have this bead, this very large fish bead, which I think will be really cute here. And I have these colored gems that I'm going to make little bubbles coming from the fish. I think that'll look adorable. So this has a hole in the top. So I'll just set my fish down, maybe a little off side here. I have one strand of gray embroidery floss. And I might even use a dab of glue on the back of the fish later on to hold it in place, since it's only being held with this top area. Might even dab a little bit of paint on the fish. We'll see how that goes. So I have the fish attached, and now I'm going to add the bubbles. I'm still using that same strand of embroidery floss. And I'll just choose some very fun colored bubbles here. And just play around with where they go. I think I'll go with a pink one next. I love adding all these little unexpected elements to the piece, using found objects and somewhat treasured objects. And that looks really cute. I think I want to continue with the little bubbles here. It's just a really cute little look. So I'll knot it on the back, and I have another block completed. So I have these turtle beads. They're really adorable. And I just love the colors. It matches the colors of my piece. So I want to just play around with that, adding just a few little turtles here to one block. I just think that looks really nice. So I'll stitch those down off camera just to hold it in place. Maybe also adding a few little bubbles. So now this one's going to be a fun one. I want to create a extra wardrobe piece for the mermaid here, like a little bra top. I have this hanger. I don't know if that'll work. Might not fit. I might have to attach it off the block. We'll see about that. But I want to use this beautiful blue. Again, I have the backing with the interfacing. It's not double adhesive, just the one-sided. And so now I just want to create the total width of the bra from side to side. And now I can really work on creating that bra. So I have the shape. I'll fold it in half to make it symmetrical. And then I'll start to embellish it with all these details. I have this little rhinestone strip for the straps. I have some pearls I can add to it. I have these beautiful beads to drape from it. Just, oh, so many possibilities here. So I'll speed this along while I create the process of the shapes and playing around with the beads and the accessories. All right, to start this, I have some components here. I think I want to start by attaching the straps in the bra itself, and I can worry about that. I think if or I might just skip this hanger. It's a little larger than I expected. So I think I'll start by stitching down the bra itself. I have one strand of embroidery floss. I'll just add a few little stitches along the bottom. All right, let me move my little components over here. I'm going to start with the bottom of the bra. I want to drape some of this beading here. I'm not sure. So I'm not really liking that after all. I'll set that aside. I'll work on just embellishing the bra here and go from there. I'll start with the straps. I'll add a few stitches up top to hold down the bra top. And then I'll carefully stitch in between these rhinestones. It's just a couching stitch and it'll anchor it in place. So that's pretty good. I'll do the same thing on this side, trying to line up the angle so it's similar. Now I want to work on embellishing a little bit. So I really like the idea of the drape, but these beads are just too small for my old eyes. So I'm going to have to use larger beads. These are a little bit larger, but they come in beautiful colors. So I'll start that drape. I want it to go on one side so it's not perfectly symmetrical. Put my string in there and then just choose some colors here. I think I'll do a series of pinks. And I like that. And I'll just bring it up here, just underneath the top. And I'll come right back through all the beads. So I'll just stitch down a few of the beads on the side here to hold it where I want. And I'll do another row. This time a little shorter. I'll start with those same champagne colored beads. And now I want to incorporate some of the pink and some of the blue. And so now I want to continue to embellish the area here. I'll start in the center here. I think I'm going to go with the star right in the center. And now I'll continue to embellish. I want to use some of these silver beads to incorporate that rhinestone. So it's just about playing around to get the right combination. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. I love how that's coming out. Now I want to add something to the top here, to the top sides of the bra. I think I'm going to use these little stars. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I have that little sparkly bra. I'll just stitch around the edge and that will be ready to be added to the page. Another square I wanted to make was a mermaid accessory, the mirror. That goes back into mermaid folklore about the mirror, and I just thought I wanted to include that as well. So I have some gray here. And I'll kind of just create the mirror shape. It'll be a hand mirror. It's a little bigger than will fit, but I'll make it work. And I'll cut around here, do some stitching, and then I have this piece of just paper that's reflective almost. And so I want to create the mirror. So on the back of that, I'll trace the mirror shape. And then I just want the actual reflective part to be a little smaller. Now I can't use heat on this paper. It will fog it up. So I'll start by cutting this kind of a head shape, really. And then I can fine tune it. And I'll add some embellishment to that also. So my mirror is done. I also wanted to play with this beautiful sparkly lace here. Think how I want to use that. I think I'm going to take this background, kind of looks like sand to me, and I'll just attach a little bit of this to make it look like sparkly sand. Yeah, that looks really great. I actually like 2 layers better than 1. And then I want to add a little bit of water and maybe something like the surf. I have this little lace, just the way it kind of ebbs over here. So I can clip that down to size. And I'll trim this up neater as I go on. But now I need some blue for the water. So I like that. I have a piece bigger than I need, and I'll remove the lace just so I know exactly how much I want to use here. Cut this out. This way it will stay right on the square, maintaining that square shape. And then I don't want a perfectly straight line for the water. I want it to be rather wavy, like that. So I have my layer of sand, and I'll trim this down. A little bit of the froth in the water, and then my water. So I'll trim this around, add some stitching. And I have another block. I wanted to make a block indicative of coral, and I had this very interesting webbing ribbon here. So I think I'll just cut that to like a manageable piece. And that's a kind of an interesting background. I'll go with the shapes to make it very organic, kind of like seaweed. And I like that background. Even just that texture alone is just beautiful. Actually, I think I'll leave it just like that. I was originally going to stitch something indicative of coral, but I like that seaweed effect. It's quite beautiful. So that's another block. So now I want to work on the coral. There is this thing as a coral stitch, but to me it doesn't really strike me as coral. There's also the feather stitch, which to me is a lot more like coral. But I just want to create just a little bit of a coral piece. Now this is kind of ambitious of me because I think I'm going to create it out of all French knots. I want that entire piece to be covered in French knots. I have two colors here that I'll use. Maybe I'll add a third one in to really pick up variations in the coral, and I'll just get stitching. So to do the French knot, I'll start one place here, right on this line, pull my thread through, and then I'll vary the number of wraps on the thread because I know I have quite a few French knots to do. So I'll start with 4, and I'll put it down. And I'll just continue this all the way around, varying with these 3 colors. So this is the finished coral. I wound up incorporating more colors than I expected, than the original 2, and it gave a lot of variation. I'm really pleased with this square. I also wanted to show you a few other squares before I stitch it down to the final piece. I have my little square here with the tag. I wound up writing Mermaid's Treasures on it, and I added a few little things. I love this little gold tool. I think it's a very cute addition. I took the shell that I had cut out and I stitched on beads of varying sizes and colors to get this cute little, it almost looks like a brooch of a shell. For one of the blocks, I stitched together all these little shards of beads. They're not particularly round, they're rounded, but they're all different ones. And I wanted it to look like a cluster of crystals. I incorporated a little gold beads and a little of that tulle on the bottom, just to give it a little treasure effect. It can be like lost diamonds or something in the sea. For this block, I wanted the water and then the surf here against the sand. And once again, I incorporated that tulle. For the shell, after I glued it down, I wanted to add a little something else. So I stitched just these beads all the way around the base of it. And it really played with the shape and it echoed the colors. And then I stitched a mirror. It's very popular in folklore for mermaids. And I wound up stitching beads all the way around it. So these are just some of the squares that I already made. The next stage will be incorporating them into my page and making the grid. So here are some of the squares just set down. I'm really just practicing my positioning. I wanted to alter the backgrounds. So here I have 2 together that are too much alike. So I'll move this over. And I have the crown, I have the sand dollar, and now I'll just fill in around it. I don't really necessarily want to put the green underneath the green, but maybe here or here. I'll try it there, see how that goes. And then I'll just play around with adding the different textures and colors. And I can see if there's anything I want to change. I have my tag, the mirror, the sand, the finished fish with the bubbles, the found treasures that sunk, the crystals, the little whirlpool that I used the lace for, the crown, the starfish. I added a few pearls and stitches. I stitched together all the turtle beads, the little spare bra top, the shell, the sand dollar, the other shell. This is the ribbon that was very open weave. I added some green beads and some lighter green beads. It just looks like seaweed or something lost, like maybe even a net, and then the coral. So the next stage is for me to stitch each one of these blocks down, trying to maintain this order, or see how I want to do it. If I want to change something else around, I'll do that. So I finished stitching each of the blocks to my fabric page to use for my fabric book, and I love how it came out. I tried to alternate the squares, the little blocks here, so that I had a little bit of color here and there with the neutrals and then the bold color. And I really like how this stands out, all the different elements here. At the end, I like to go over my work and see how I can learn from it for the future here. And I really like that I have some very simple blocks and others are more textured. And I love the little interactive elements. It makes you want to look in the mirror, feel the shells, and just all these little goodies throughout. So this is my mermaid's scrapbook page or journal. Oh, this was a very fun challenge for me. So that is my fabric book page with all the supplies, or most of them, courtesy of Jen from Owl Crafts and Collectables. She is a treasure. I really enjoyed this challenge of creating a beach theme using fabric, textiles, and of course some found objects, my favorite. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And be sure to check out Jen's channel as well. Thanks for joining me today.